go trains.
Trains. Hello and welcome to Random Scottish History's Scottish Railway Incidents for July 1900. The usual trigger warnings apply. Nobody escaped the railways: children, adults, the elderly, pets, farm animals. If it could be killed on the railways, it probably was. It's not all doom and gloom, but that is mainly what we're talking about here. You're likely to end up with repetition through further articles giving more information to an earlier reported incident, and there's going to be mispronunciations of both names and places because there are lots of both. So we'll just get into this one, I think. We start with the Dundee Evening Telegraph for Tuesday the 3rd of July, and it's a fatal railway accident. Carter killed at Kelty. Yesterday, a carter named William Finlay, residing at Moss Green Place, Kelty, was fatally injured on the Perth and Dunfermline Railway at Kelty Station. Finlay had crossed the railway at a point near the north end of one of the platforms for the purpose of getting a travelling bag. On returning with the bag, he was run down by a coal train and was so much injured about the head that he immediately expired. Deceased was 60 years of age.
Tough line start. So here we have Edinburgh Evening News, Thursday the 5th of July. Fatal railway accident near Haymarket. Shortly before 2 o'clock this morning, the body of a man about 25 years of age was found lying in the 4-foot way 200 yards west of Haymarket West Junction on the North British Railway line. He had met his death by being knocked down by a train. His right foot was severed and his head was severely smashed. The body, which was taken to the city mortuary, was dressed in brown corduroy trousers, dark tweed jacket and vest. The deceased was about 5 foot 6 inches in height, of medium build, with dark hair and slight dark moustache. Head was smashed, it says. Severely smashed. You don't really see that in the papers these days.
I don't know how much the information they'd be prepared to go into.
I mean, they might not go into that, and if they did, they probably wouldn't describe it like that. I don't think. Smashed is quite a interesting term for it.
You don't really get these kinds of injuries happening so often that they're... I think they were happening so often that it says shocking railway injury. It's like, are you really that shocked? You know?
Yeah.
Did they have to start putting these details in just to keep it of interest to people? Because maybe people were just going, there's another one, you know?
I guess so, yeah.
From the Dundee Evening Post, Saturday the 7th of July, a terrible railway accident. Man cut up, falls from a carriage. When a train from Wamesby was nearing Bishopton Station this morning, two gentlemen in a third-class compartment noticed that a fellow passenger, whom they did not know, had disappeared, and that the door of the compartment was open. The train was stopped, and a search was made along the line when the remains of a man, terribly cut up, were found. He was caught by a train going in the opposite direction. It is supposed that he is John Mitchell, who resides in Pollock Street, Glasgow. Our Glasgow correspondent finds on further inquiry that Mr. Mitchell was cashier to Messrs. A. B. Fleming and Company Limited, printing ink manufacturers, Waterloo Street, whose headquarters are in Edinburgh. He was living at Skilmorley and travelled up and down morning and night. He was 29 years of age, unmarried, and has been in the employment of the firm for over a dozen years. So we'll maybe miss him.
A lot of information about him as well. It's really random how much info you get on the people. Like, I suppose it's just what they can dig up. But right, so next up we've got Edinburgh Evening News, Saturday the 7th. Accident at Musselburgh Station. 4 railway carriages were damaged in Musselburgh Station this morning by the breaking away of an empty train which was being shunted into the station. It appears that the coupling of the carriage next to the engine slipped. The end carriage, which met the buffer bank, was telescoped, and the second one was also badly smashed. The next 2 were less damaged. Fortunately, there was nobody about to sustain injury, and the wrecked carriages were got out of the way of traffic as soon as possible. So that's the automatic coupling that we need sorted for that one.
It's probably a good job there's nobody about to be hurt, because when
When
carriage is
shunting's happening,
telescoped, it didn't bode well for folk inside. Next is the Dundee Courier, Monday the 9th of July. Fife Railway Bridge on fire. An overhead bridge on the Dunfermline and Alloa section of the North British Railway at a point about 100 yards to the east of Bogside Station was destroyed by fire on Saturday afternoon. The bridge, which was built of wood, was of a substantial character, forming part of a farm service road. The fire, which was discovered between 5 and 6 o'clock, is supposed to have originated at the foot of the supports. A stiff breeze fanned the flames, and the heavy beams supporting the upper part of the structure were soon burned through, with the result that the whole bridge collapsed. The wreckage, after it fell on the railway, continued to burn for a considerable time, and traffic was delayed. The line was completely blocked, and those travelling east or west had to leave the trains and walk past the burning pile. Immediately on the outbreak being discovered, a breakdown squad was dispatched from Dunfermline, but it was several hours before the line was cleared of wreckage and the permanent way restored. Those who suffered most inconvenience by the fire were agriculturalists whose stock was returning from the agricultural show at Dunfermline. The stock could not be transferred, and the train by which it was being conveyed had to remain to the east of the scene of the fire until the work of repair was completed. So it doesn't say whether it was an engine that set fire to the bridge, maybe a spark from a passing train that set fire, but that was the main cause of fires in and around railway stations, was sparks from the tender.
Okay, so next up, Dundee Evening Telegraph, Monday the 9th. Suicide on the railway. On Saturday, the remains of Robert Reid, a labourer residing at 20 Strathclyde Street, Glasgow, were removed from the Rutherglen mortuary, where they had lain for identification. Early in the morning, Thomas Lancaster, a brakesman, had seen the deceased go on to the railway near Shawfield siding, and before he could render any assistance, Reid had placed his head on the metals as an approaching mineral train was coming up. Mrs. Reid states that her husband had been in bad health for some time and had declined to go to the infirmary a second time to undergo an operation. In the morning, he left his house while she was sleeping and apparently had travelled out to Rutherglen and had gone on to the railway for the purpose of committing suicide. That's pretty bleak, that.
I assume his treatment was
Psychological, maybe?
can't have been helping him out much, or he felt like his condition was
Terminal, I suppose.
yeah, maybe. I mean, why else would you refuse hospital intervention? Like, he must
Would you
have just
have to
thought,
pay
you know what,
back
I'm
then?
done.
Is it
Yeah.
pre-NHS?
It's
So
pre-NHS.
yeah, it's maybe the financial burden of it that sort of prompted him.
Hospitals, I think a lot of the hospitals were charitable institutions, so they were getting donations. So if you died and you had some money, you could make it so that X amount went to the charity or the institution of your choosing, like on an annual basis. Occasionally you'd get reports of how certain institutions were still subsisting off the interest of donations given to them by wealthy benefactors. So I think they were charitable institutions. So if you can pay for your care, I don't think it meant that you weren't cared for. Just maybe you'd have to share a room or whatever. You didn't get, you know, whatever benefits pain got you.
Less privileged treatment, you know.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Dundee Evening Telegraph for Tuesday 10th of July. Killed on the railway. Last night, Walter McCrindle, porter at Crossley Station on the Greenock and Ayrshire Railway, was run down by a Greenock train and instantly killed. Deceased was a native of Ayrshire and unmarried. So, short one for that.
Short to the point. Okay, so next up we got Dundee Evening Post, Wednesday the 11th. Railway accident at Forfar. Benefit of runaway points. 2 carriages off the line. The value of run-off points was never more clearly manifested than in connection with an accident which occurred at Forfar station shortly before noon today. The engine and carriages of the Arbroath train were standing in the usual siding awaiting the passing of the 11:30 express, which was somewhat late. After the English portion of the express had passed, and while, it is said, signals were set for the Edinburgh and Glasgow portion, the driver of the Arbroath trains proceeded to back his carriages onto the main up line. The station master, Mr. Irons, immediately observed what was in progress, whistled loudly, and held up his hands in warning, but, unfortunately, too late. 2 of the carriages ran off the metals and cut up the permanent way to a considerable extent, but for the existence of the run-off points, it is more than probable that the express would have rushed into the carriages of the Arbroath train at the moment close at hand. As it was, the signals being damaged, the express had to be hand-signalled into the Forfar platform. A breakdown gang was requisitioned, one of the carriages lying at a dangerous angle. Both, however, were soon restored to the metals. Sometimes I think there'd be a better way of signalling, just like a
They signalled in all kinds of
spotlight
ways.
or something, you know.
They signalled with audio detonators, they signalled with hand signals and lights and things.
I would think the audio might be like, I don't know, everything's so loud. It seemed to me like you may not get over the sound of the train
you would
for the
notice
engine driver, you know.
detonators, I would think.
Oh.
I don't know. The Edinburgh Evening News, Wednesday the 11th of July. Fatal railway accident at Grahamston, trial of the engine driver. At Falkirk Sheriff Court yesterday, before Sheriff Bell and a jury, William Scaife, engine driver from 129 Dundas Street, Grangemouth, was charged with having, on the 15th of May last, while driving a locomotive engine from Grangemouth along the Grangemouth branch railway towards Grahamston station, disregarded the signals then set against him at the junction between said branch and the main line of the North British Railway, and driven the engine, or allowed it to pass, from said Grangemouth branch on the main line, and caused a collision between the engine and a passenger train from Edinburgh to Grahamston, and so killed Florence Leslie, daughter of Andrew Leslie, signalman manual, a passenger in the train. Scaife, who was defended by Mr. William Findlay, advocate, on the instructions of Messrs. Clement, M. Campbell, Wallace and Allen, writers, Glasgow, and Mr. Arthur W. Thompson, solicitor, Falkirk, pleaded not guilty. A large number of witnesses on both sides were examined. The evidence went to show that, although the signals were against the accused, his throttle valve refused to work, and he could not stop his engine until he had crossed the point. At the close of the evidence, the jury retired and returned after an absence of about 15 minutes with a verdict of not proven by a majority of 13. Not proven is a particularly Scottish finding in court cases. You have guilty, not guilty, but you also have not proven, which doesn't mean that you're not guilty. It just means that the jury have decided that the case hasn't been proved beyond a reasonable doubt.
More evidence required, basically.
Yeah, there have been a number of people in Glasgow's history particularly who got away with not proven decisions for their court trials, and when it seemed obvious to the general population that these people were guilty. So it's been contentious in its past, and there have been calls to abolish the not proven finding, but as far as I'm aware, it's still available as a finding in Scotland. So.
Interesting stats to look up on that one, I'm sure. So next up we got Dundee Courier, Thursday 12th of July. Tragic affair at Cupar, Slater's fearful end. A painful case of suicide occurred on the railway near Cupar about 8 o'clock last night. A few minutes before the 6:40 p.m. express from Edinburgh, which does not stop at Cupar, was due, a man informed the station officials there was a man down the line below the water bridge, with his coat and vest off, waiting to throw himself in front of the train. By the time the message was delivered, and before anyone could be sent to the rescue, the train had thundered past the station at the rate of between 60 and 70 miles an hour. On going along the line after the passing of the train, the station officials discovered the fearfully mutilated body of George Roger Slater, residing at South Road, lying on the 6-foot way. He was completely scalped, and his face was all but smashed off. While pieces of his brains were scattered here and there for a distance of 20 yards, one of his arms was severed from the body and lay a few yards away. Dr. Crichton was early on the spot, and after the body had been sent by Captain Bremner, Chief Constable, it was removed to his house at South Road. When the train stopped at Lookers, the guard wired Mr. Stewart, the agent at Cooper, that he saw a man throw himself in front of the engine about 50 yards west from Cooper. The engine was besmeared with blood. Deceased leaves a widow and a young daughter.
And I'm sure the widow is going to really enjoy that roundup of her husband's death.
That was a particularly nasty one, that. Like, in terms of the description, yeah, another suicide as well. Lots of things being smashed this month, by the sounds of things.
For the Edinburgh Evening News, Thursday 12th of July, fatal accident at Stirling. Word has been received in Stirling that Joseph Walker, canvasser in the employment of the North British Railway, residing in Shettleston, died there last night from the effects of an accident received in Stirling on Monday while unloading machinery for the Highland Society's show. He had been known all over Scotland. In the same accident, Peter Mackenzie, lorryman, Aberdeen, had both legs broken. Yes.
So next up, Dundee Evening Telegraph, Thursday the 12th. Shocking suicide on the railway. There's a lot of suicides this month. So yesterday forenoon, a most determined suicide took place on the Glasgow and South Western Railway at Gretna. On rounding the curve of the line at Gretna, the driver of the express, which was due at Annan from Carlisle at 11:30, observed a young woman lie down on the metals. He at once sounded the whistle, but no attention was paid to the warning. The brakes were applied, but the engine and carriages passed over the body. The head was completely severed from the trunk and rolled down the embankment. The train, which was close on Gretna Green Station, was pulled up, and the railway officials, going to the scene of the affair, found the body and head of the young woman, who was identified as Annie Thompson, residing with her parents at Gretna. The woman was about 28 years of age and unmarried.
We have from the Greenock Telegraph and Clyde Shipping Gazette of Friday the 13th of July. Unlucky for some. Distressing accident at Greenock West Station. Yacht captain falls in front of a train. Shortly after 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, a distressing accident occurred at Greenock West Railway Station, whereby Captain Derrick, residing at 78 Dempster Street, received frightful injuries. He had intended journeying to Gourock to join the yacht Ivy, belonging to Mr. Winnan, an American millionaire, which was lying in the bay. On the train's arrival, Captain Derrick was attempting to enter a compartment when he slipped and fell onto the rails between the platform and the footboard. As the train was still in motion, one of the wheels went right over his right leg, which was fractured. The right arm was also broken, while his body was all more or less bruised. There were a considerable number of people on the platform at the time, and the sad accident caused a painful sensation. Assistance was soon at hand, and the injured man was lifted up from the rails. Dr. Nairn was in the vicinity at the time and also promptly rendered help. Meanwhile, the carriage ambulance was telephoned for, and shortly after had the captain removed to the infirmary. An examination was made, and it was then apparent that the injuries were very serious. Later in the evening, the right foot was amputated at the ankle. Captain Derrick is about 30 years of age. On inquiry at the infirmary this forenoon, we were informed that he had stood the operation well, and his condition was now fairly favourable. I think people were withstanding operations better at this point because I think they were on top of pain reduction during operations. It wasn't a case of just get the operation over as quickly as possible because, you know, there was no anaesthetic going on. But
yeah, and how a train can go over a limb and break it, not just sever it, is, you know, I can't work out how that happens. Like,
oh, bump over the thing, wouldn't it? Like,
I mean, that's what goes through your head. It's just like, I mean, if a train weighs dozens of tons, just like in itself, it's just metal on metal. A wee leg in there, you can't imagine it just bouncing, you know, because like, there's more wheels to come, you know what I mean? Like,
that's what the drivers and that say that they experience is they reach the station and they're like, listen, the train's definitely come into contact with a thing. I felt a bump on the line, and it's like,
yeah, maybe a rabbit, but we better check, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up we got Greenock Telegraph and Clyde Shipping Gazette, Saturday the 14th. Fatal result of railway accident at Greenock. Captain Peter Derrick of the steam yacht Ivy, who slipped and fell onto the rails while attempting to board a train in motion at Greenock West Station on Thursday afternoon, died in the infirmary at about 5 o'clock last night from injuries then received. Deceased, who resided at 78 Dempster Street, has left a widow and 4 of a family for whom much sympathy is extended in their bereavement. Continuation of that. The distressing accident at Greenock West Station. To the editor, Greenock Telegraph. 16 Union Street, Greenock, 13th of July, 1900. Sir, your readers must have been painfully affected by your account of the sad accident at the Greenock West Station on Friday. Personally, however, I am not astonished at it, for everyone who has been in the habit of coming to the station from any of the east stations, or of starting from it to Falkirk, must have often had a dread of such an occurrence, for at this part of the down line the rails are laid with a slight curve, and with the north rail a little lower than the other, so that the carriages incline away from the platform, the footboards becoming thereby not horizontal and leaving a considerable gap between them and the platform, which at the best is too low for easy entrance or exit of the carriages. The remedy evidently for this state of matters is the raising of the platform, and this should be urgently pressed upon the directors of the railway. I am yours truly, James Wallace, MD. So a wee bit of feedback there from a reader stating that he's not surprised.
Yeah. I mean, if the passengers are seeing these possibilities, you would think the station authorities possibly knew that these things were likely to happen and they've not done anything to prevent it. So
just waiting until there was enough doctors writing in to complain about it before, right, okay, we'll spend the money, you know.
Yeah, or enough people injured. Dundee Courier for Saturday the 14th of July. Terrible fatality at Perth, man decapitated. A shocking railway fatality occurred at Perth last night, whereby a carriage inspector named James Graham, 40 years of age and residing at 1 Whitefriars Street, Perth, lost his life. Graham had been on the down line about midway between the Creef and Dovecotland bridges and about 50 yards south from the clearinghouse at Balhousie, when the Aberdeen Express due in Perth at 7:55 ran him down, killing him instantly. It appears that deceased had been walking along the line and had stepped from the back of a goods train right in front of the rushing express. He received injuries of a terrible nature, his head being completely severed from the body, while his limbs were frightfully mutilated and dismembered. So he didn't stand a chance.
No. It's a pretty nasty month, July, has to be said. So next up...
don't feel like it was very much different from the other months, really, but...
maybe it's just in the descriptions are more detailed or something, I don't know, but I'm getting the impression that July was, you know... maybe it was really hot or something and people were going a bit, you know, stir crazy or something. Anyway, so Edinburgh Evening News, Monday 16th of July, Police Sergeant's son killed on the railway. Francis Watty, son of Police Sergeant Watty, stationed at Prestwick, was accidentally killed on the Glasgow and South Western Railway near Moncton Station on Friday. He had been sitting on the last wagon of a goods train which was being shunted backwards. The train jerked and he was thrown on the line. The train passed over his chest and he was instantly killed. Nobody's safe from the shunting?
No, you don't want to be anywhere near shunting. The Perthshire Advertiser, Friday 20th of July. Another serious railway accident, an unfortunate guard. Another railway accident, fortunately not so serious as that which took place last week, occurred on the line in the vicinity of Dovecotland Bridge this forenoon. It appears that William Grassy, the guard on the Methven goods train who resides in Market Street, was performing some shunting operations when he sustained severe injuries. Grassy, who is a man 45 years of age, has considerable railway experience. It is supposed that in the act of uncoupling or coupling wagons, he allowed the shunting pole to project too far out from the train, with the result that it caught a signal pole and he was thrown underneath one of the wagons. His left leg was smashed above the ankle, while his right leg also received a severe flesh wound. He was immediately removed to the infirmary by Mr. James Smith and Mr. John McFarlane of the Station Ambulance Corps and others of his workmates. After examination, it was found that the leg would require to be amputated. Grassy has been in the employment of the railway company for about 20 years and was at Perth South until some months ago when he met with an accident at Moss End which necessitated the amputation of the fingers of the left hand. It was at that time he received the post of guard on the meth and goods train. A significant feature in connection with the accident is that it took place within a short distance of the spot where the railway inspector was killed on Friday last. Jeez.
Yeah, working there for 20 years, maybe he was able to get some severance pay, something like that. That was a bad joke.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up, Bells Hill speaker, Saturday 21st of July. Sad railway fatality. Late on Friday night, a young man named John Barry, 24 years old, residing at McCann's Buildings, Hamilton Road, Bells Hill, was found on the Caledonian Railway near Clydesdale with both of his legs cut off. It appears that he had taken the railway as a shortcut home from Holytown Station, where he had left the train, which did not stop at Bells Hill, and in getting out of the way of an approaching train, he stepped in front of another, and before he could realise his danger, he was knocked down and had both his legs cut off. His moans attracted the attention of a young woman who resided near at hand. After being medically attended, he was removed to the Royal Infirmary, where he died early on Saturday morning. He leaves a young wife to mourn his loss, for whom much sympathy is felt. On Tuesday, the remains were interred in Bothwell Cemetery, prior to which a very imposing funeral service was conducted in front of deceased's residence by the Salvation Army, of which he was a member. The whole proceedings, which lasted for about an hour, were listened to by a large and sympathetic crowd. At the close of the service, the coffin, enshrouded with the army colours, was carried on the shoulders of brethren to its last resting place. The Blantyre Salvation Army brass band, augmented for the occasion by players from Milnwood Band, played most appropriate hymns during the service and on the way to the cemetery, while the members of the army sang the same. There was a large turnout of the members of the Salvation Army, wearing white bands on their uniform, and other mourners. Quite a send-off that guy got.
Yeah. So for the Airdrie and Coatbridge Advertisers, Saturday the 21st of July, painful accident. On Friday, a man named John McCann, 48 years old, a steel worker residing at Old Square, Calderbank, met with a rather serious accident. He had been lying asleep on the embankment of the railway siding within the Calderbank Steelworks when he seems to have rolled over onto the rails. At all events, his right foot got run over by a passing pug engine, and it was so severely crushed that amputation was necessary. McCann was afterwards removed to the Royal Infirmary, Glasgow. People seem to be able to fall asleep anywhere.
Yeah.
So many people falling asleep on the lines or next to lines, and that would have woken you up having your foot run over. Oh my word.
Long working hours, you're knackered at the end of your shift.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up, Dundee Courier, Monday 23rd of July, accident to a Dundee guard. On Saturday afternoon, a rather serious accident befell David Duncan, a passenger train guard in the employment of the North British Railway Company. Duncan, who is well known in railway circles in Dundee, left Taybridge station with an afternoon slow train for Edinburgh. When the train was steaming out of Inverkeithing station, Duncan, in jumping onto the footboard of the van, got his foot caught by the lid of an oil box, which was open, and stumbled and fell between the moving train and the platform. The train was stopped, and the unfortunate man taken from his dangerous position when it was found that he had sustained severe injuries to one of his sides, several of his ribs being broken. Duncan was removed later in the day to his home in Edinburgh.
Breaking ribs is horrible. You can't really fix broken ribs, can you? Edinburgh Evening News, Monday the 23rd of July, accident to passenger guard. David Duncan, a passenger guard on a train running between Dundee and Edinburgh and residing in Norton Street, Edinburgh, met with a bad accident at Inverkeithing station on Saturday night. Duncan missed his footing while leaping onto the van and got dragged along the platform for a distance of 30 yards before the train could be brought to a standstill. He was bruised about the face and head and was injured internally and was conveyed to Edinburgh Royal Infirmary. Internal injuries didn't bode well for people either.
So next up, Dundee Evening Post, Monday the 23rd, fatal occurrences in Edinburgh. Frederick Cowser, residing at 223 Gorgie Road, a carrier inspector employed by the Caledonian Railway Company, was accidentally run down by a train at Morrison Street on Saturday night and terribly injured. He died shortly after his removal to the Royal Infirmary.
For the Scotsman, Tuesday 24th of July, a railway accident near Airdrie. Alexander Duff, goods engine driver, was seriously injured yesterday morning at Forestfield Station on the North British Railway. He had slowed down his train for the purpose of exchanging the oval tablets with the signalman when the tablets got mixed, resulting in the signalman being thrown on the platform and Duff being dragged from his engine and pulled 30 yards between the platform and the outer rail. His right arm was torn off. How would tablets getting mixed up end up? Oh, it's another one of those you had to kind of be there to see it, to understand the logistics of a thing, maybe.
Diagram might help. Dundee Evening Post, Wednesday 25th of July. Shocking fatality at Moneyfeith. Man run down on the railway today. A shocking railway accident occurred this forenoon near Moneyfeith Station. A man, not yet identified, having been instantaneously killed by an upgoing train to Dundee. The discovery was made by some lads who at once informed the railway authorities at Broughty Ferry. The body was lying in the 4-footway in a frightfully mangled condition.
Jeez, that would have given the boys something to talk about at school. For the Dundee Evening Post, Wednesday 25th of July, we have a fatality at Moneyfeith. This is later on to Alex's article. The accident appears to have happened at Marshall Place, a short distance to the east of Barnhill. It is thought that the man, on stepping onto the line at the level crossing, was knocked down by the train leaving Arbroath at 12:01. The body was carried about 290 yards and when discovered was in a horribly mutilated condition. The body was removed to the mortuary at Broughty Ferry, where it lies awaiting identification. The unfortunate man appears to be of the labouring class, which doesn't really tell people very much in the way to identifying him. Most of the people were of the labouring class, I would have thought.
Yeah. Apologies to anybody at home who can hear our cat licking its foot right now. Seems to be quite close to the microphone.
It is just a Zara cat.
Yeah. Really getting in there. Next up, Edinburgh Evening News, Wednesday 25th of July. Man killed on the railway near Carnoustie. A man, at present unidentified, was run down and killed on Dundee and Arbroath Joint Railway today. He was walking on the line between Carnoustie and Barry when he was overtaken by a Caledonian fast train. When the engine was about 15 yards off, he stepped between the rails and was almost instantaneously killed. Deceased is supposed to be a holidaymaker from Dundee. The body was much mutilated.
So he stepped in front of that train.
It's often the way of these things.
North British Daily Mail for Wednesday the 25th of July. Vale of Leven local notes. Mrs. Boshop, wife of Mr. John Boshop, Flesher, Alexandria, met with an unfortunate accident while alighting from a train at Bowling Station. On medical aid being obtained, it was found that the unfortunate lady's shoulder blade was broken. She was afterwards taken home in a serious condition. We're not told how that happened as she got off a train. I don't know how you break your shoulder blade getting off a train.
Yeah, probably a few as you do that. Just fell off the train.
Doesn't say she fell though.
No.
And if you fell, you'd fall forwards, wouldn't you? So, how would you break your shoulder?
A passing train with a bit sticking out of it. No,
I would
I don't
even
think that would have
mention
worked
that.
either.
Like,
No, it would have.
Plus, you've got the train you were on to your back when you're leaving, so there isn't really space for another train.
No, yeah, it does occur to me. Yeah.
I don't know. That's very strange. I don't know.
She must have been. I don't know. Maybe she's shunted by a human shunting incident.
Details for that one for us to work it out, but there you go.
So next up, Dundee Courier, Thursday 26th of July, a miraculous escape. An accident, which might have had much more serious consequences, occurred yesterday on the railway near Arbroath to a boy named Alfred Robb, 10 years old, residing in Ladybridge Street. It seemed that the boy had been spending the day at Elliot along with two other companions and was returning to Arbroath when the accident happened. The lads at Elliot entered a compartment of the train which leaves Dundee for Arbroath at 3:30 p.m. While in the compartment, Rob amused himself by looking out of the carriage window till a point on the railway near Hospital Field Gates was reached, when it is stated the carriage door flew open and precipitated the lad onto the permanent way. On being thrown out, the lad managed to crawl onto the Dundee road, where he was found by two men who, after temporarily bandaging up the boy's injuries, had him conveyed to the infirmary by means of a cycle. At the infirmary his wounds were dressed, it being found that he had sustained a rather nasty wound on the side of his head. How the lad escaped more serious injuries is really miraculous, for the train was running at fair speed at the time.
Jeez.
Infirmary by means of cycle? Is it motorbike or?
It's
No,
more
it's
likely
too
to
early
be
for
a
motorbikes,
bicycle,
isn't it? It's a
isn't it?
bicycle, isn't it?
Yeah. That's. I think we've already covered an article like that where did the boy fall off a bridge and climb his way up the embankment afterwards, or he was fine or something?
Yeah.
I know. People clambering from the lines after being hit, though. I mean, that's just a situation no one wants to be in. We have the Edinburgh Evening News for Thursday, 26th of July. Letter to the editor. The dangers of railwaymen. Unusual Dispatch writes, with reference to your leader in Tuesday's issue regarding the accident to a North British rail driver while exchanging tablets, you state that unfortunately time-saving is the rule on the railways, and sometimes it is saved at the expense of risk to life and limb. As regards this, I may state that there is more paper wasted on the driver of a passenger train dropping 3 minutes than the killing of a man. That's nothing, Mr. Editor. Men are cheap now, as I will explain. Then you state it may be that the companies have the time bills pared to the finest limits. My answer to that is, in a good many cases, taking the road of the train into consideration, the engines can do no more. Then, as regards carelessness on the men's part, I honestly admit some accidents are caused that way, but so long as there are railways, there will be accidents. Then you go on to say something ought to be done to prevent the occurrence of sickening accidents. Something has been done. An apparatus is presently in use on some railways, doing away with the necessity of the driver or fireman running any risk whatever. But of course, that costs money, and money they do not intend to part with. Being a fireman, I can point out a still greater danger which the public are unaware ever exists. That is when a fireman requires to trim some coal to keep the wheels going around. In 9 cases out of 10, it has to be done when running down a bank with steam off. Then up goes a fireman onto the tender, daylight or dark, doing his best before steam is required again, and running a terrible risk of having his head chopped off by overhead bridges, etc. A duty I have to do nightly, and sometimes I forget the bridges until my mate will shout. Of course, this is forbidden, but cause any delay by standing till this duty is done, and your services would be no longer required by a certain date. As regards my statement that men are cheap, I think you will form the same opinion when I state firemen are paid from 18 shillings to 24 shillings weekly, with an average of 7 to 10 years before he becomes a driver. So, we've known that to happen. We've discussed articles here where the fireman has been up on top of the tender and has had his brain smashed in by a bridge that he's come in contact with, and in later articles and House of Commons reports, they do talk about and do implement gauges within the trains, within the cabins themselves, to prevent the firemen having to go up to do these things. So yeah.
Nice to see more people making an awareness of things that need fixed.
I mean, he's really just stating the obvious, though, by this point, isn't he?
Oh, he is, aye.
Like,
But a lot of people wouldn't take these things into account. It's just keeping it in the public eye.
well, the railways have already had half a century of running by this point. So, I mean, the fact that there's still so many accidents and injuries and things.
Oh yeah, shocking.
It's kind of bizarre. Like.
So, next up, Dundee Courier, Thursday, 26th of July. We have sad railway fatality, Moneyfeith golf greenkeeper killed. Yesterday forenoon, Mr. Alexander Donaldson, golf greenkeeper at Montefieth, met with a sad death on the joint line. He left home about 9 o'clock in the morning with the intention of visiting the ladies' course at Barn Hill, Broughty Ferry. On returning to go home, he was about to cross the line at the crossing at Marshall Place at the east end of the golf course and got in front of the Caledonian Midday Express for Dundee when he was cut down and fearfully mutilated. The driver, who gave information at Broughty Ferry, observed the man get on the rails, but had no time to give a warning whistle, far less draw up. The accident happening within the Broughty Ferry boundary, the remains were afterwards gathered up and conveyed to the mortuary there, and in the evening they were identified as those of Mr. Donaldson, whose sad end will be deeply regretted not only by the many golfers who frequented the links, but by all with whom he came in contact. Mr. Donaldson was somewhat dull of hearing, and that no doubt accounts for the accident. Our Montefieth correspondent writes, "When the accident happened, there was another train on the down line fast approaching the same spot, and deceased may have seen the one and not noticed the other. There is also a sharp curve at the place, and a train could be quite close before it would be noticed. Alexander Donaldson was a well-known and highly respected member of the community. He acted as minister's man to the late Reverend Dr. Young for a long number of years. After leaving that position, he was appointed greenkeeper on the golf course, and was in that capacity brought in contact with a large number of the golfing fraternity who frequent the course. By these and by the general public he was held in much esteem. He leaves a wife and a grown-up family for whom much sympathy is felt in their sudden bereavement."
For the Kirkintilloch Gazette for Saturday 28th of July, railway accident. On Thursday night, an accident occurred on the Caledonian Railway near Castlecarry, which caused considerable delay to the traffic. As a goods train from Carlisle was running between Eberon Hill and Green Hill at 11 p.m, one of the couplings gave way and the second portion came into collision with the first near Castlecarry Castle, causing several wagons to leave the rails. The breakdown squad was immediately wired for from Motherwell and was soon at the scene of the accident and had the wagons re-railed. Meantime, the railway officials at Green Hill had single line working put into operation, the whole of the traffic being conducted over the up line till 4 a.m. There was no damage done to the permanent way, with the exception of the 120 chairs broken. Railway chairs. I found it.
Oh, the chairmanity.
Railway chairs are, you've got your sleepers, which are your wooden slats that make up the railway. You've got your rails, which form the permanent way that the trains go down. Your chairs are what hold the rails onto the sleepers. So they're like brackets to either side. You'll see them. You know exactly what I'm talking about if I put up a picture. So I'll do that. And that's what railway chairs are, and I think they're quite heavy, obviously solid metal, and sometimes people would put them on the line in a bid to try and derail trains, but then the amount that are spotted by the drivers in time to have them taken off the line, you wonder how, because these aren't big things. They really are just brackets for the
like the wee curly bits of metal that just sort of overlap.
It's just the two. It's just the two brackets that the rails fit in that are bolted to the sleepers. You know.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. So next up, Edinburgh Evening News, Saturday 28th of July. Shocking railway accident at Alexandria. This forenoon, as a train was about to start from Alexandria for Glasgow, William McBrien, 40, a carter, rushed onto the opposite platform carrying some parcels. He attempted to cross the rails, but at the moment a light Caledonian engine came along on the down line. McBrien was struck on the back of the head and receiving a severe fracture of the skull. Death was instantaneous. Deceased leaves a widow and a family.
For the Dundee Evening Post, Monday the 30th of July. Early on Saturday morning, Patrick Hughes, 49 years old, miner, Lacklands Buildings, Calderbank, was found lying seriously hurt at Palace Craig railway siding, having been run over by a train. He was removed to the Alexandra Hospital Coatbridge and died shortly after admission. So we got one.
So lastly, we've got Edinburgh Evening News, Tuesday the 31st of July, fatal accident at Leith Docks. A man named James Annan was killed this afternoon by a railway wagon passing over his head on the premises on the Edinburgh dock occupied by Messrs Patmore and Co.
Yes, a railway wagon passing over your head is absolutely going to make it a fatal accident.
Yeah, that'll do it. How? Just, well, it leaves a lot to the imagination, but
Most
yeah,
of these
we'll
things
see how
you
these
don't
things
want to
go.
imagine. Like,
Well, no, but they make you. Okay.
cheers for joining us again for July of 1900, which was, well, it's quite horrible this month. I can't imagine it's going to get better.
Mm.
I mean, it doesn't get better.
Yeah.
So, if you're in for more of this, then we'll maybe see you for August for next month's roundup for 1900.
Yes, lots of people getting smashed on the railway in July, so we'll see what happens to them in August. Maybe it'll be better, but
Yeah, maybe.
maybe not.
Alright, so
Cheers.
possibly see you next time. Bye.